Well, hello and good morning, and welcome to another installment of Dr. Childress Answers Your Questions. I was asked a question by a parent regarding a couple of videos produced by Teal Swan, who's a recovered um, child of severe trauma, and she's assisting others with trauma recovery. And she's got a YouTube channel and does all sorts of seminars and things like that. And so she's done a couple of videos on parental alienation about 11 months ago. And I was asked to provide an opinion about what I think of the content and Teal Swan's entry into the family courts and parental alienation. Now, I kind of get a little possessive of my kids and my clients in the family courts, and so nothing comes into the family courts that I'm not aware of. And I'm aware of Teal Swan. I hadn't realized she'd produced the videos on parental alienation, but I was aware of Teal Swan from before, several years ago. I'm a trauma psychologist. It's my job to kind of know what's swirling and what's there. And I looked into her a couple of years ago, and I have no particular problems with Teal. I think everything she's doing is relatively accurate. In fact, it is accurate. So, with regard to the current question, Teal Swan's produced two YouTube videos on parental alienation. The first one is The Truth About Parental Alienation. And then the second one, Are You a Parent Who is Being Alienated? And the first video that she does is sort of speaking about the pathology generally and speaking about the child's experience, or tends to focus on the child's experience in the situation and explaining the pathology. And she does a good job of explaining the pathology. Now, she does use the term parental alienation, and I'll discuss that in a little bit, that I'm not a fan of using that. But that's because I'm a psychologist and I'm a professional, and I'm trying to improve the quality of mental health services in the family courts. And there's no clinical pathology called parental alienation. It's a delusional thought disorder, it's a factitious disorder, it's child psychological abuse. And at the same time, though, Teal's not a mental health professional. And so it would be beyond her scope to begin talking about delusional disorders and factitious disorders. She does clearly identify it as child abuse, which is my concern. Because when we start to use euphemisms like parental alienation, it hides the fact that it's child abuse. And we need to say child abuse when it's child abuse. You know, it's not inappropriate affection syndrome, it's child sex abuse. It's not overly harsh discipline dynamic, it's child physical abuse. And it's not parental alienation, it's child psychological abuse. And everybody needs to understand that. And that's my problem with using euphemisms that hide the fact that it's child abuse. Now, Teal entirely understands that. And so I have no problem with that. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But other than that, I have no problem with her content. She does a good job of describing the child's experience and the pathology and all the various features involved. I suspect she's had some contact with me and my information. She uses the term parental alienation dynamic, which is something I had introduced when I first came in, because I wanted to separate what I was talking about from parental alienation syndrome. And so she might be aware of that and using that same sort of approach of saying it's a dynamic and it's not really a pathology. But she stays very much within her own scope of experience, scope of knowledge, and professional practice. And so I have no problem with her using parental alienation or coming into the field. And so she does a good job of describing the pathology. In the second video, she talks a lot to the parents about what they can and can't do and how to approach the child and various things like that. And again, I think her content is accurate, and I have no problem that she's potentially exploiting a vulnerable population. And that would be the concern here, is that the people who are traumatized are vulnerable, and they're looking for solutions, they're looking for ways out, and especially in the family courts, these parents are so desperate for solutions that they become vulnerable to exploitation. And so that would be the concern. And I don't have any concerns surrounding Teal and the exploitation of the, the people in the family courts. My two concerns: is her information accurate, which it is, and is she on the light or on the dark side? You know, how is she using her knowledge? And she's on the light side. She's working for the good of children and the good of people. So, to get more specifically about my opinion, Teal, her history is that she's a self-recovered adult survivor of multi-domain childhood abuse and trauma. So she's had a broad experience of very severe childhood trauma. And so when she first self-recovered and began to help others in that process, she focused on a broad array of trauma recovery. And that's when I first kind of encountered her and looked at her. And I kind of spot checked various videos to see if she's accurate. And she's accurate in her information on the broad scale of trauma. And that's one thing. When I looked at her, I didn't watch all her videos. I looked at various videos from various domains and looking at her content. Does she know the trauma, and is what she's telling people an accurate description of things? And yes, it is. And so if that's accurate, and this is accurate, and this is accurate over here, and I got all these different points, then I'm fairly confident that everything in between is also accurate, because she wouldn't be accurate on the other stuff if it wasn't. So I'm relatively comfortable with her broad scope of information. Although I haven't looked at it all, and I'm not endorsing her whole broad scope, but I'm comfortable with it. There's nothing of concern that I've noted. So that's her background history. Now, her role that she's in is guiding others in recovering from childhood abuse and trauma. And the reason she's in that role is because of the profound failure of professional psychology for children and people who've been traumatized. The traumatized children, professional psychology is a complete, total failure. And that's one of her strong messages early out as she's coming into the trauma world, is that the professionals don't have a clue as to what's going on or what to do about. And she's absolutely 100% right on that. And that's why I will, cut her a lot of slack on this, because when the now recovered child needs to go back and recover others, that's just a real indictment of the professional psychology on that. And so she does YouTubes and seminars and retreats. One of the things about YouTube is that as a content creator, it's really easy to create content right off the top, but then it gets harder and harder over the time because you've said everything. And so she might be running into that kind of thing of, she's basically told everybody what to do and how to recover and things. And so she's now found her way over into parental alienation and the child abuse in the family courts. And so that's another thing here, is because of what she does, because she doesn't have a license herself, she is vulnerable to the allegations of sort of cult-like thing when she gets a lot of followers and people are listening to her, and she's doing a lot of guidance, broad scale guidance with people. And so there's that kind of aspect of concern, that she gets a little cult kind of thing. But again, that's just part and parcel of the failure of the mental health system and people in the general public needing to come forward. Now, her recovery was from very, very severe forms of trauma. So kudos to her for finding that path through and out. And so there's always worries about exploitation of others, but I don't see that from her. I see an authentic desire to help other people, and she has a right to make money, and so she's doing that. She's providing information, and as long as she's providing services for the money she receives and everything, and the services are valid, then I have no problem with her making money. And so what she's doing is fine by me and things, and I don't. There will always be, when you have a large scale movement, that mindset of some people who lose boundaries, okay, kind of thing. But I don't see Teal exploiting that natural process that occurs around this genre of intervention or assistance. So and so the scope of what she does, again, is broad scale trauma with a recent entry into the world of parental alienation. And I'll point out again that the reason she has this role is because of complete and total absence of professional psychology in helping the children. I absolutely agree with her 100%. So her audience, her market as a businesswoman, as a, earning her living, is for broad scale trauma recovery, and again is not specific to the family courts. But as she moves into the family courts, her audience or her target would be the parents in the family courts for consultation or seminars or various sorts of things like that. And I see a potential market for her in the now adult recovering children of parental alienation. And I actually see a larger role for her potentially in that domain. As the children escape the family courts and enter young adulthood and they're kind of confused and stuff, I think she could be a very valuable voice in helping them orient to the pathology, orient to what they went through, and recover from the child abuse, the psychological child abuse that they went through. So as far as my review of Teal and her content on trauma overall is accurate. I have no problem with her content or anything she's saying about trauma. She knows her stuff. She's obviously looked into it, and she has a personal experience that she brings that is extremely valuable. And I don't sense a whole bunch of distortions from her recovery. So however the path she found, she did a pretty good job of cleaning things up. Regarding her content on parental alienation, I would say, again, it's accurate 100%. I don't have any problem with anything she said, which is kind of rare. So if I have, and now just pay attention, be mindful. With the forensic psychologist, I have massive amount of problems with everything they say. But with Teal, not a bit. Okay, so she's better than your mental health people in the family courts. And then for the guidance that she provides on parental alienation, again, I would say that's accurate. And so I'm very protective of my kids and my parents and vulnerable population. I have no problem with anything Teal's saying or doing with this population. So in terms of my opinion, to answer the question, Dr. Childress is 100% comfortable with Teal Swan's guidance on parents and of the parents and the now adult children of the family court trauma of parental alienation, child abuse. Teal Swan's videos represent a valuable resource for explaining the pathology and the child's experience, especially the child's experience. I think she carries the voice of the child very well. And Teal Swan's videos are appropriate, and I would recommend them for viewing by all my mental health professionals working in the family courts, I would recommend they watch Teal's videos. Because she does such a good job of explaining the child's perspective and the context and what's going on in that situation. So at one point in one of her videos, she says, if you know of anybody who could benefit from these videos, such as your mental health person, provide them. Yeah, I would support her in that. I would. She has my recommendations of following that to the mental health people. Check out Teal's just as a scope to understand the child's voice a lot, and a good description of the pathology. My descriptions are very professional level because that's my role and what I'm doing, but she does a nice job of capturing it at a very common language level situation. So what I'll say is welcome to the family courts, Miss Swan. It's good to have you here. And for me, I've worked child abuse. Okay, I worked foster care. And when you're working in that domain with the therapists and the CPS workers and community agencies and everybody, there's more than enough work to do. We got a lot of work to do in child abuse and to get a handle on things. So if you want to come work with us in child abuse, absolutely roll up your sleeves and let's get to work. The only thing is you leave your ego at the door and you focus on getting the job done. And so there's more than enough work to be done to allow Teal a voice and her work to also participate in that. Hopefully over the next 2-3 decades or whatever, the mental health people will come forward and start solving this, and we won't need the children to self-recover and then figure out how to recover other children, and we can get the mental health professionals into their proper role. So now, earlier I said I have problems with parental alienation. If you know me, you know that's true. The made-up pathology label of parental alienation is a euphemism for child abuse that hides the child abuse from view, hides the child abuse from the court's understanding, and prevents effective intervention for the child abuse. Teal Swan fully understands this. I have no problem with that. And as a now adult survivor of childhood trauma, she can call it whatever she wants. The children have that right. And so let me say that as well. I will not ever argue with a child of childhood trauma about what they call it. If you want to call it parental alienation, call it parental. If you want to call it Bob, call it Bob. I don't care. You've earned the right to your voice, okay, and to call it what you want, to identify what you want, to do that. And I'm not going to argue with you. My focus is over with the professionals. The professionals need to use the professional level terms. And right now it gets a little confusing, and it allows the professionals to escape competent practice. So if a parent says, I think it's parental alienation, then everybody starts looking, the professionals start looking for parental alienation, and the quality of professional services drops off. If you say, I'm worried about a possible delusional thought disorder, persecutory thought disorder, then you hold them accountable to assessing for that thought disorder. So when you're interacting with your professionals, use professional terminology, but generally that's fine. And the children, the now adult survivors, can call it whatever you want. And so with that, my summary of Ms. Swan, the content from Teal Swan is accurate. I have zero concerns. She's a valuable resource for parents and for the now adult recovering children. And I think she's especially valuable in that area. And for mental health professionals to describe for them to understand the child's experience and the pathology in sort of common language. But the professionals need to be using the DSM-5, ICD. We need to be making diagnosis, coming up with the treatment plans to fix it. And my opinion is that Teal Swan speaks with the authentic voice of the child, and that's always a good voice to have in the mix. And the child's currently is mixed up. Okay, they're confused, they're psychologically controlled, manipulated. And so it's very valuable to have that now recovered voice out there. But then those now recovered voice children can be vulnerable and fragile and various things. So I don't want to put the burden on them. But Teal's a good person to carry that voice for them. So I will endorse her as that voice. So with that, that's my opinion about Teal Swan. Welcome to the family courts. And if parents or mental health people want to check out our videos, I would recommend that. So with that, I'm going to end this question and head off to the rest of my day. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.